TCI is brought to you by Spendthrift's leading freshman sire, Arch. Already the sire of 9 first-crop 2-year-old winners, including the dominant Barrett's Juvenile Stakes winner, Toes on Ice.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Breeders' Cup. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, we have a super weekend of racing, and man, we got to jump right in because there's a lot of racing to talk about. And let's start right here in our own backyard. Of course, I'm talking about Keeneland, and let's talk about the Phoenix. We got some sprinters in action. You know, we see Run Happy in here, a horse that won a Grade 1 last time out, but we also see Work All Week. He won this race last year and then won the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And, Joel, he looks like he's back in form.
He really does. His last race was a tremendous effort, John. You know, this is the time of year last year where, you know, he was on the street coming in the Breeders' Cup, but he really got good at the end of the year. Broke through. I don't think that was a great sprint division last year. I think it's a little bit better this year with Rockfall. We saw him last weekend, you know, Private Zone being in good form. I think it's a better division this year, but certainly Work All Week. Good to see him back in form. He loves Keeneland, and I like where he draws here, the 12-hole. He's outside. He's tactical in a big field like last year's Breeders' Cup Sprint. I think he can pick his spot. What's interesting about this race, it's filled with speed. I mean, you had Fast Anna in here, Run Happy from the rail, has got to push out of there. Holy Boss, I think, is a live long shot, turning back, ability to stalk there, going 6 furlongs. But let's see how the rain plays. I mean, rain's going to be the key of the whole weekend, John, starting tomorrow, and then it's going to carry out through until Sunday, both at Keeneland and in New York, obviously with Joaquin. Rain is the main storyline here. How are these tracks going to play? Is it going to be a bias? Are they going to have to seal the tracks? Are they even going to race on turf this weekend? I mean, rain is the big factor here, and we'll find out in the Phoenix tomorrow, you know, what happens there. And look, it may be one of those races where you say, well, yeah, there's a rail bias sealed track, and look, Work All Week had no shot from the 3-path. Let's see what happens here, but I think rain's going to be a huge factor this weekend.
Yeah, it definitely is, and with Keeneland having this new track, it's going to be a good test to see what's going to happen going into the Breeders' Cup.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and talk about the Spinster now. You know, last week you revealed a top 5 there in that division, and we see 2 horses from that top 5. Of course, I'm talking about Untappable and also Got Lucky. You know, Got Lucky lost last time out, and Untappable hasn't really been on top of her game. But, Joel, you do think that she'll get better here at Keeneland?
She's not as good this year. I mean, just frankly, she's not as good this year, but I can find excuses about her last couple races. I mean, she ran into a hot Wedding Toast, you know, on Belmont Stakes weekend there. Wedding Toast loves that racetrack. And then at Saratoga, a place where Untappable's probably never really been at her best. You know, she was, you know, sort of on the pace last time. The pace came back. The closers had an effect in that race. So you can kind of make some excuses for some of her performances this year. And look, sometimes fillies just get better in the fall. I mean, the weather's cool. I mean, you never know. Does she have the ability now to take a step forward and return to her prior form? I'm not saying she doesn't. She has not been a top-class elite filly this year.
Yeah.
I do think she can return to that. We'll find out just how good she is coming up to the Breeders' Cup this weekend. I just hope rain has subsided by Sunday and it's not as much of a storyline going into the Spencer Stakes. But you mentioned Got Lucky, a small filly. She just keeps getting better, has a big wet track pedigree. If there's enough pace to set up her kick in the Spinster, I think this filly is tailor-made for a big field with a legit pace going a mile and 1/8.
All right, well, let's move now to the Shadwell Turf Mile. You know, and we talked about rain being a factor on the dirt. Joel, this could be a major factor this weekend in all the turf racing, including the Shadwell Turf Mile. We see Grand Arch in here, and we also see Bobby's Kitten. You know, Bobby's Kitten's going to really bring some speed into this race. Tell me, what do you think about it?
Well, you put $1 million up, winning you're in, and you get a monster field in here. I mean, 13 horses and a lot of class. I mean, there's a lot of Grade 1 type horses in here, whether they're in form now or not. And I see a lot of speed. I mean, you mentioned Bobby's Kitten to be on the pace. Taurus is a fast horse. King Crease is a fast horse. So I see a legitimately fast race in terms of the pace. And I see, obviously, what's going to be an off-turf course, John. I mean, it's been raining all week here in Lexington. That turf course is going to be yielding at best. I give the Europeans turn of foot. I give them a huge advantage in here. A horse like Dutch Connection, his form over there, Adamile, he's a 3-year-old. You know, he's been running behind Glen Eagles. I really think Dutch Connection, the turn of foot he's going to display in here, he's going to be tough to beat.
All right, let's stay at Keeneland. Let's talk about the Thoroughbred Coaching Club of America. And let's talk about Judy the Beauty real quick. You talk about a filly who's always consistent. What do you think about her chances in this race?
Well, certainly, you know, she's a filly that's, you know, 4 for 4 at Keeneland. So she loves it there. 432 wet track number. Goes Zapper and that awesome again. You know the wet track's probably not going to affect her much, but she hasn't been as good this year. They've had to give her a lot of breaks in between races, and I think a filly like Lee Court, the defending winner in this race. You know, she's a 6 furlong specialist. To me, she's a little bit better on dirt than she is on turf, and maybe even synthetic. But if you look at her form there, if she can run back to the TCA last year, I believe Lee Court is the horse to beat in here, third off the layoff.
All right, well, let's move now and let's go to Belmont. Let's talk about the Flower Bowl. You know, we talked a little bit about races coming off the turf. You know, this is even further in. You know, they're predicting a lot of rain here. This could really affect Stephanie's Kitten's chances to run here. This may come off the turf.
Well, if you remember, she was in against the boys in the Woodford Reserve on Derby Day, scratched from there. I mean, she has been lightly raced this year because she skipped some races for various reasons. Well, she might not get a race in this weekend with Joaquin dropping, you know, buckets of rain there in New York. This could very well come off the turf because of dangerous conditions on the course. And in that case, they will scratch her, and they'll have to train her up to the filly and mare turf, John. That's problematic, I think. I would like to see her get a prep in because I think she runs in here. I think it's between her and Kirby, the 3-year-old Coolmore filly. It's got a good race record over there. I think she could be very tough with Stephanie's Kitten. But look, there's a few main track only entrants in this Grade 1. It might not wind up even being a Breeders' Cup prep this year. That whole win and you're in thing might not even wind up being a prep.
All right, well, let's talk about a race that's not a Grade 1. We've been talking about a lot of Grade 1s, but we're going to talk about the Kelso right now, and why we're going to talk about it is Honor Code is going to prep in here. Joel, it's kind of strange, you know. I always thought that they were kind of pointing towards the Classic, but now they're going a little shorter distance here. You think maybe they're thinking about the mile?
I think it's probably a consideration. You know, here's a horse that he's so good around one turn. I mean, won the Met Mile. You know, I still think that they have their eyes on the Classic. I mean, there's nothing but upside for Honor Code. Son of AP Indy, really probably his last top Grade 1 winning son to go to stud. If they want to get that stud fee to level, you know, to market him properly, I think they're going to want to try to have a shot at the Classic. But you have to be concerned about him going 1.25 miles. I mean, I know he's by AP Indy and everybody thinks stamina, but to me, I was impressed by his Whitney performance at 1 1/8 miles. He clearly likes Saratoga, but 1.25 miles is another animal altogether. I wonder if he will like to go that far. I do think he's the horse to beat here. But look, if it's a sealed track at Belmont this weekend, he doesn't have to win this race. I mean, Red Vine's a pretty good horse. Tamara Hughes is a pretty good world-class miler. And to me, Appealing Tale's in top form right now. Coming in from California, this horse is a great middle distance horse in terms of his form right now, and he's got a lot of speed drawing the rail. If it's a sealed track, he's got a big wet track number. Appealing Tale gets away from Honor Code. The late close isn't going to have an effect on that track. I think Appealing Tale can sneak off and maybe pull the upset.
All right, well, we got one more to talk about. Before we do, I want to launch a TCI Top 5, and of course, this will be in the Classic division, then we'll jump into the Jockey Club Gold Cup. But let's reveal the TCI Top 5 here, and let's see at number 1, no surprises here, you got Toneless. Joel, this horse is really good. There's a lot in there that people would probably say should be above him, including the horse you got in at number 3 right now.
Yeah.
But tell me why you got Toneless in there at number 1.
Well, I like the older horses over the 3-year-olds, and particularly at 1.25 miles, where again, that brilliance isn't quite as impressive to me. When you think about American Pharaoh and his races at 1.25 miles, you know, I know he got a great setup on Belmont Day, and he was just the best horse and looked tremendous for that race at 1.5 miles. But again, facing this level of horse, the older horses, and just thinking about this Breeders' Cup, John, they're giving away, you know, $5 million. You're going to get probably a full gate in here. I mean, right now, RAC over 10 probables in the field, and there's a good. I mean, if Liam's Map runs in this race fresh,
yeah.
I mean, obviously, Constitution's a fast horse. There's a lot of fast horses that are lined up for this race. So American Pharaoh's going to have to deal with some legit fractions against some legit top-level older horses in here. That's why I like closers. I like Toneless. At 1.25 miles, I still think he's probably the best horse in the country. Been inconsistent. We'll see what he's all about this weekend. Beholder, how can you knock what she did in the Pacific Classic? Beholder, I mean, really, that's a 1 and 1A. A very top-heavy division right now, John, when I look at this group. I don't think it's super deep, but I think it's very top-heavy, and that's the top 5 I'm going to start with anyway.
All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about the Jockey Club Gold Cup because there's some horses in here that didn't make your top 5 who will run really well if it is a sealed track, and of course, that horse would be Constitution. I think that horse, you know, he runs really well if he's on a muddy surface. Tell me, what do you think about his chances in the Jockey Club Gold Cup?
You know, what's interesting about this race is, you know, between Wicked Strong, between Coach Inge, between Constitution, Toneless, they all have big wet track numbers. But I do think a sealed track's going to favor speed. I mean, something that takes on that much water. I do think Constitution is made for that. You know, I think Connections are optimistic about him being able to, you know, get a lead in here over a sealed surface. I think they're a little behind with him. They would have liked to seen him further along, you know, right now and have a little bit more time leading up to the race. But I do think if he sneaks away here, Coach Inge will probably try to stalk him. Then obviously Wicked Strong, Toneless, FNX, these are deep closers. These are horses that are going to make one run from the end here. Watch out the effect of the wet track. I mean, it's been a theme of the show. But we could very well look back at all these results on Monday, John, and say, how much was this really a Breeders' Cup prep weekend? I mean, a lot of betting is going to be influenced off of this weekend's results. However, if it's rain impaired, there could be some major odds fluctuation and major value come around in the Breeders' Cup. I do think Constitution could sneak off in here, but I love Toneless. Horse that should love the wet track, loves Belmont. I think Toneless should win this race.
Well, it's going to be an exciting weekend of racing for sure. It's going to be great just having racing right back here at Keeneland. It's an interesting year because, with the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland, all those preps are always so important, but now it's even more important with it being right here in our own backyard. So
absolutely,
it's going to be a huge weekend.
I'll be there, umbrella in tow.
Well, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you come back next week. We'll see how all these horses did on Super Saturday.